Welcome to Unleashing Happiness with Cecilia Hendricks, the podcast where I teach you how to change your mindset, change your habits, and change your life. Today I'm going to talk about a subject that's really near and dear to my heart. And the reason that it is because I struggled so much with this. And it's something that even today, I have to go back and remind myself a lot of which moment I should be living in and what I should be paying attention to. It's very easy, I think, as a human, to either focus on this future event that you really want to have happen. And so you're always kind of waiting for this future condition to happen for you to live in X or Y certain kind of way, or to continue to review the past and go back through things that have either hurt you or upset you, or to just kind of keep reliving moments that did not go the way that you really wanted them to. A few years ago, I picked up the book, The Power of Now. It took me a long time to get through that book. I really struggled with it. I actually put it down and went back to it multiple times. I will link it down below if you'd like to buy a copy or check it out. Even though I'm saying I struggled with it the first time, now it's actually one of my favorite books. I do believe that when you sometimes first approach something or a new lesson, it's not going to quite sit with you, or you may not fully understand it or absorb what the message is. But a lot of times you can go back and it's like your understanding at that time, your perception of life and the perception of things and information that's coming at you has changed. And so you're able to quite understand the message more than you could have the first time. And that was definitely true for me with The Power of Now. So I do want to start today with a little game that is from that book that I always find very interesting and very neat. And so if you're driving, wait until later to do this, or maybe just don't close your eyes. But if you're at home, I want you to take a moment to close your eyes and ask yourself, I wonder what my next thought will be. If you're like me or most anybody else that I've had do this or talk to about this activity, most other people that your mind goes about blank. This activity, your mind actually went blank. Silence, and you had a moment of quietness. I can go back to this activity multiple times and have the same thing happen. Although now my thoughts definitely start to pick up a bit quicker than they did the first couple times that I did it, it is an easy way for me to just quiet my mind. And it's interesting that asking myself this question of, I wonder what my next thought will be, creates a quietness in my mind that I don't usually have. I am someone that definitely has a lot of mental chatter that's usually going on in the background of my mind. I am often thinking of 100 things at one time. Was there something that I forgot to do at work? Did I send that email? Is there something that the kids need to get signed up for? When does flag football start? What do I need to add to the grocery list? Did the dog get fed? Is he running out of medication? The list could go on and on and on. And all the way down to, I should move my bird feeder from the backyard to the front yard. And it's constant. I mean, it takes me a while for me to become more present and come into the present moment to relax myself. And so I do use this exercise to kind of quiet my mind and sometimes so I can focus. I like having an arsenal of things that I can use to quiet myself, calm myself, come back into the person that I want to be, the way that I want to present myself. And it's not to say that I don't ever falter and that sometimes I don't behave in a way that I would prefer that I don't. It's always a journey. I'm definitely still learning. But being able to come into the present moment and really focus on what is happening to me right now really helps calm me and puts me just on a better perception of the world. Usually when I do this, there's nothing actually wrong going on. If I stop and I look at my present moment, at that moment in time, my world is fantastic. If I don't have to worry about anything that happened an hour ago, and I'm not going to worry about anything that's going to happen more than an hour in the future, then it's not my focus, and I'm able to just be within that moment and what I'm doing at that time. Throughout this episode, I'll go over a few other ways that I do that and what I've kind of found this has helped in my life. It definitely goes back to the list of joys and the reason that you do these joys and really pay attention to them while you're doing them. And we'll get a little bit deeper into that today as well. There's a quote from the book, though, that I love that says, "You find yourself by coming into the present." And I just find it so interesting because you are really only the person that you are at this present moment. And I know that maybe that sounds a little woo-woo and kind of out there, but you are constantly changing. Your state, your identity, your perception, the way you see yourself in the world, it is constantly changing by what you accept coming in from your environment, the way that you're working on yourself, the way you feel at that moment, kind of whatever hormones are going through, have you eaten, how was your sleep, etc. Everything is always changing, which means the person that I was yesterday, although technically, yes, I'm still that same person, I'm not in that same present moment. I'm not in that same perception that I was in yesterday. And I'm definitely not in the same one that I'm going to be in tomorrow. Every day, every moment is a different shift for the person that you are. And so I want you to take a moment and just really think, at this very moment, what do you believe true of yourself? Do you love yourself? Are you happy with your body? Do you think that you're funny? Do you feel loved by those that are around you? Do you feel like you're desired and that you have friends? Do you feel like your financial situation is in a good place and that you're able to afford the things that you want to do? And if you do in this present moment, that's fantastic. If you're being the person that you want to be, you're your ideal self, your ideal identity, your ideal state right at this moment, then that's a moment that you should continue to return to. But two, it also tells you what type of feeling you should return to if you ever find yourself faltering and you're trying to return to an ideal state, an ideal way of feeling. But you can also be honest with yourself and say, well, I keep thinking that I am financially independent, but truly at this moment, I don't feel that. Truly at this moment, I feel of myself that I am stressed out about bills. I don't know how I'm going to pay the mortgage. I'm looking around and kind of wondering, how I'm affording groceries and et cetera, et cetera. And you can become very honest about the person that you are in this moment. We're not looking for a future moment. There's no reason to wait for a future condition to enjoy the life that you have now. You don't need to wait for a future condition to start feeling that you are the person that you want to be right now. And that's a lot of the premise of the book. And I also think other spiritual teachers and gurus, even such as like Tony Robbins, I've heard Mel Robbins say the same thing, that you really have to become the person that you want to be in this moment. Right now, there's no waiting. You don't have to wait for this future event to happen for you to be able to live the life that you want to live. And I'm sure, don't get me wrong, I'm sure there's folks out there who are rolling their eyes at me like, well, you don't understand because you don't know the life that I have right now. And I definitely empathize with that. I am not currently in that type of position, and I did slowly get to the type of position that I'm in now, but I still have my own struggles with certain areas of my life. There's still things that I am working on, and that when I come into my present moment, I'm like, wait a minute, this is not actually how I want to feel about this relationship. This isn't actually how I want to feel about my career. This isn't actually how I want to feel when I'm put in this type of situation. I don't like my reaction sometimes and the way that I behave. And I say the way that I behave because for me, it always goes back to the emotional intelligence. So if I'm able to stop and say, okay, in X relationship, I react in a certain way, that's not actually the way that I want to identify. My behavior within that relationship, my emotional reactions, the way that I feel when they do or say something is not actually the way that I want to react. It's not the way that I want to treat someone else, and it's not the way that I want to treat myself. And that doesn't have to be some huge thing. I'm not a yeller. I don't like lash out. I'm not throwing things. It's nothing of that nature. But it could just be even the mental conversation that I have with that person. That's not a way that I want to treat somebody else. That's part of my identity. The way that I want to behave in my moments is that I don't have those type of mental chatter about other people, that I don't have a desire to maybe think poorly on the outfit that they're wearing. But it's very human of me to admit that that's a fault of mine. And it's not necessarily that I'm going around like, oh, I can't believe they're wearing that. Don't get me wrong. It's not like that. But there are times where I'm like, that's an interesting choice for work. And I'll stop myself because I'm like, well, why would you even think that? That's not the way that I want to behave. It's not the thought that I want to have. And so it's good to be able to catch yourself. And that also comes back to the present moment. So if I catch myself and I say, that's not actually the way that I want to behave, and then you're able to shift the way that your mind is working, shift that mental chatter that you have going on, and shift your focus back to yourself. Now at this point, I'm not worried about them or what they're wearing. Instead, I'm worried about myself and the way that I'm behaving. I had a friend once tell me that the first initial thought that you have is kind of what society has taught you. That's been your environment, the way that you've been brought up. But your second thought is actually the way that you want to be. And I use that phrase and I use that type of thinking to give myself some forgiveness when I have those kind of moments. My initial thought to say, oh, come out. This is the way that not a way that I want to identify. It's not a way that I want to behave. It's not the person that I want to be in that moment. And so I allow to myself forgiveness by saying, you know what, that's actually not the way that I want to be. That is just my environment, my habit that has been set up in my mind to think that way about other people, or to have mental arguments with my significant other that, are in my head and actually never even come out. And usually then when you talk to the other person, I find out that they were not in the position that I thought that they were in. They were not feeling the way that I thought that they were. So convinced in the conversation in my head for a little bit that they were going to feel. And the conversation doesn't go the way that I had thought that it was going to go when I'm having this kind of like mental chatter. And you have to remember that beliefs are always going to, they're swaying, right? On what kind of belief you're having, the feeling that you put behind it. And then that ends up kind of becoming manifest in your life, the things that you continuously return to. So if you're continuously returning to not being a nice person in your mind, having mental arguments in your mind, struggling with your significant other, that's eventually going to start playing out for you in one way or another. And it's because it's your perception. You're going to start seeing that person's behavior reflect back to you your conscious bias that you have of how they're going to behave, how they're going to act, the way that they're going to treat you. So going back to living in this present moment, if you've stopped and you've considered, how do I see myself now? How do I identify who is actually the person that I want to be? How do I want to feel when I go to bed? What are the things that I would like to do with my life? What are the ways I would like for my brain to fire and the thoughts that I would enjoy to have? Then become really honest with yourself. Are you waiting for a future condition in order to enjoy your life now? So do you have this thought? And if you're someone who does like manifestation techniques, are you attempting to create a scene, look ahead, an affirmation, do whatever kind of thing because you want something to happen in the future? Because you need a future event in order to feel good now. That actually can become quite the cycle because it's the way that you feel now, today, that mirrors into your life tomorrow. And that becomes very hard, and it becomes just kind of a cycle, right? Of your wanting something and you're looking forward to this future event. You've identified a condition that you have on that, whether it's the love of a person, a certain amount of money, being a certain weight on the scale, whatever kind of thing it is, you've identified a future condition for it. And so you're always seeking this future condition. And so what does that actually create for your feeling now? The feeling that it creates now is a seeking, right? So a lot of times I've said this is a desperation, and I don't mean that in a rude way. But if you're desperately seeking something, the feeling that you're having is desperation. So what you continue to get mirrored is things to feel desperate for. That's what your perception is that you are always striving for this future thing. You can't quite get to it. You need this condition to happen in order to feel good now. And that becomes very, very difficult to get out of, because for you, you may look at it, and I know I did, of, well, I'm just persisting in it. I'm just going to continue. And I will tell you, based on my experience, sometimes that works out. And eventually you kind of get to the point where it becomes more natural, and you do a subtle shift from being in this desperate one to feeling like, no, this is really what's happening. But it may not quite work out the way that you want it to. But remember, you don't get what you want, you get what you believe. And if everything is mirrored back to you, your brain is always looking for the confirmation of your biases. It's always going to show you your perception. It's always going to reflect back to you the way that you feel. Like, here, yes, you are correct. Self, like brain to self, you are correct. And here's the way that you are correct. And I'm going to show that to you. And then it just becomes a frustrating cycle, because you're like, well, I'm persisting in this, but instead I'm just getting more frustration. I'm not getting the response that I want. And you look back on, there was a study that I talked about on the podcast, and then also on my YouTube channel, that said that there was folks that were studied who had self-identified as either lucky or unlucky. And they were given a paper, and essentially the answer to the question was really big on the front page of the paper, and they all got the same one. The unlucky folks were not even able to perceive that the answer had been provided to them. So they're looking at this paper and they're completely missed it and just moved on. And the lucky people saw the answer right away. And it's because their minds, your brain is set up to confirm your bias. So if you're unlucky, of course, you're not going to see that answer. That's not going to be there for you. So they literally could not even perceive the words that were not hidden. They were large print, big words on the front page. Everybody got the same thing. They couldn't even perceive it. But the folks that had said, yes, I am lucky, things always kind of work out for me in life, and truly believed that, were able to see it right away. They were able to perceive that this lucky thing was already available to them in life. And that's a big reason why I'm always pushing this daily list of joys and adding them to your day. Because if you're able to take a look, and I have another podcast episode all on this, how you're spending the majority of your day. If you spend 5% of your day consciously doing things to align to your ideal self, to a desired outcome for you, you're either spending time in meditation, you're working on what you can visualize, you're doing affirmations, you've got a killer morning routine, whatever it is, that's probably about 5% of your day. So then when you take a look at the other 95%, what is it that you're actually doing? And if it's squashing everything else, well, then you're just stuck in a vicious cycle again, where nothing is going to work essentially the way that you want it to, because you're kind of canceling it out repeatedly. So this can become really frustrating if you continue to find yourself doing this. But if you take joys, things that provide you happiness that you enjoy doing throughout the day, and you start to focus on those, then you are creating a natural sense of gratitude and positivity within yourself. It's not this fake gratitude. It's not a forced behavior. And whether you're coming back to your present moment, or you're looking to increase gratitude in your life, or positive feelings and thinkings in your life, the less that you force, the better. And this becomes, at first it can feel like it's forced. I know that it did for me, and it took me a few years to actually understand what it meant for it not to be forced. And the less that I force it, the better it works out for me, and the way that things just kind of fall into place, and they make me feel good, and I'm able to live a better life that's aligned with the way that I want to be, and the identity that I want to have, and the state that I want to be in. And so when you're able to do these very simple joys and really pay attention to them, pay attention to how your body feels and how your mind feels while you're doing them, and put yourself into that moment, you are actually training your mind how to come back to the present moment. You're training your mind how to see gratitude and to start seeking confirmation bias that good things happen to you and things happen during the day that make you feel good. So one that I really love, I love the birds, right? I like listening to the birds and sitting out. And actually in our new home, we just bought last year, and it's a brand new development. And so there's not many mature trees. Actually, I'd say there's like 0 mature trees. And so when we first moved in, there's like no birds around. And so I started putting out my bird feeders, and I started making sure there was water available. And, I can tell now that the construction has died down a bit, there's a lot more birds coming. And there's actually 2 hummingbirds that I see all the time. And I just think hummingbirds are so cool. So on my front porch, I put a hummingbird feeder. And then, as I mentioned before, I want to move another bird feeder out front because I like sitting out there. It doesn't get the south sun. And so it's really nice in the afternoon to sit out there and be able to read my book. And so that's what I'll do. I'll leave my phone inside. I definitely struggle with picking up my phone all the time and checking it. Instead of allowing myself to sit in that moment, I'm kind of looking for a distraction. And I don't know why, but it's just something that I've noticed about myself. So I'm trying to break that habit, and I do leave my phone inside. But I'll go sit outside and I'll spend time reading my book, noticing the fresh air, paying attention to the birds. I have the hummingbird feeder out there, so they come by quite a bit. And it's just very peaceful. And if I'm struggling to get into that moment or to notice this joy that I'm giving myself, then I'll go through my senses, right? So I'll identify 5 things that I can see. Then I'll identify 4 things that I can hear, 3 things that I can feel, 2 things that I can smell, and 1 thing that I can taste. And bringing that kind of moment back, and I'll switch up sometimes the senses, and so maybe I'll do 5 things that I can hear and 4 things that I can feel. It doesn't matter which ones you do, but at that point, I'm bringing myself back into my body. I'm paying attention to how I feel in that moment. And I'm also working with my mind to start picking up things that are going on around me. And you can do this at any time. So if you're feeling anxious, it's a good way to kind of ground yourself, to start paying attention to something else. If you struggle, maybe like, let's say with the scent one, then leave scent out and just say, okay, I'm going to identify 5 things that I can feel. And I'm going to identify 4 things that I can see. Another way that I have done this that has worked for others that I've shared it with is that you look around where you are and you identify an object. So let's say it's my coffee cup that's sitting in front of me right now. And from that coffee cup, I will, without touching it, imagine what would it feel if I touched the coffee cup. So would it feel warm? How would the mug feel against my hand? Would it be heavy? Would it be light? What shape would my hand be around the coffee cup? And I just start to think about all these different ways that the coffee cup would feel. Then I imagine if I were to pick up the coffee and smell it, what would it smell like? If I were to drink it, what would it taste like? And I really focus on that. And it brings me back to this moment. It gives my mind something else to think of. And you can do it even with kind of something weird, right? Like, it's kind of funny. I'm sitting down in the office and there's a little Yoda statue that's in here, and that's where my eye went. And so if I were to look at the Yoda statue and think, okay, if I were to touch this, which I don't know that I actually ever have, what would it feel like? And I imagine kind of how the material would feel against my hand, how like the wrinkles on Yoda's face would feel under my fingertips. And I just start to focus on that. and it automatically calms my mind. It brings me back into this moment because, and I'll link to the video below. I'll find it and link it to it. Maggie on YouTube did a phenomenal piece on how she did an experiment with herself, which one day I'll talk about self-experiments because I think they're the greatest way to learn. That's kind of how I've gotten to the point that I am, is just trying stuff on myself. Like for 2 weeks, I'm going to do this and see what happens. And for 30 days, I'm going to do this and see what happens. And it gives me a little challenge and I kind of like doing it. Maybe that'll be something I talk about next week. I'll jot that one down. But she did this really great self-experiment where she decided that she was going to remove her mind and her thoughts away from anything that did not directly affect her within the next 24 hours. So if it was going to affect her within that 24 hours, she would give some attention to it, right? And she's thinking affect it, like let's say you have a bill to pay and the bill is due on the 15th and it's actually the 1st of the month, but you pay your bills on the 1st. Well, because you pay your bills on the 1st, that would be considered within that 24 hours. So it's not like, oh, I'm not going to pay my bills because they're not due until the 15th. You would still do that action within that because it would affect you within the next 24 hours. But if it did not affect her within the next 24 hours, she moved her mind to something else. And it really brought her back into concerning herself with this present moment. And without giving it kind of all away, I'll link the video below. I definitely recommend you watch it. It was a really neat experiment that she did. And she found that it became much easier the longer that she did it. And it actually helped to keep her in this present moment, and things kind of seemed to naturally work out better for themselves because, and as she states in the video, a lot of times you fret about something that ends up not happening the way that you thought it was going to. And you've wasted so much energy and so much focus on this thing that really just didn't need your time or attention. And your attention is literally one of the most precious and valuable things that you have. It doesn't cost you anything, but it can truly change your life when you start to choose how you're going to place your attention, where you're going to place it, and how much time you're going to give things in your life. And that's a choice that's completely up to you. But you have to remember that your focus, your attention is your most valuable asset. And when you start to look at it that way, and not beat yourself up, right? This is not about saying, oh, I don't do this right, or this is why things aren't going well for me. No, we're letting all that go. There's forgiveness and empathy because the only way that you behave, or the only reason that you behave that way, is because you are stuck in a habit loop, and it's an emotional habit loop. And that's what we're working on, is how to break those. And so you start to give yourself better rewards. When you come into the present moment, you pay attention, you add joys to your life, you start to recognize the small wins in your life, you start to point out the things that go really well for you, then you're able to shift your attention and your focus, and you're giving yourself this new reward because you'll feel better. Paying attention to these really great things in your life that feel really good and that give you a sense of accomplishment and that you're learning something new and you're just really enjoying that small moment that happened in your day, then you're breaking that cycle that you had to focus on the negative. And a lot of times, we kind of focus on the negative and on our suffering because it gives us a false sense of control. That way you're never disappointed. And I do think there's a point where you can lean into being really curious. Why am I so scared of being disappointed? Why is the fear of being disappointed or the fear of something not happening keeping me from being able to live better right now? So this fear of being disappointed in the future can prevent you from enjoying your moment right now. And that is a terrible cycle to be in, because guess what? When you hit that future moment, you're still in the same cycle. And then you hit the future moment again, and you're still in the same cycle. And maybe you will have a confirmation that you were right and things were not going to work out for you. And that's because it's mirroring back to you and you're receiving what it is that you believe is going to continue to happen to you. And again, that's because your brain wants to prove to you that you're right. So if you believe that you're unlucky, you're going to get the signs that you're unlucky. If you believe that you're not good at something, you're going to get the signs that you're not good at it. And so start really to shift and work on coming into this present moment and learning how to be the person, feel as you are the person that it is that you want to be, that you have your desired outcome, that you're living this ideal life for you. And hopefully the tools that I shared today help you come back into that present moment, really feel yourself, get back into your body, and lean into something that at first is probably going to feel uncomfortable if you've been stuck in a negative habit loop for quite a while. But in time, I promise you that it will help. So definitely sit today, write out your list of joys, decide which ones you're going to add, and work on the mindfulness techniques so that when you're doing those, you come back into that moment. And it can be extremely, extremely small. You start where you are now. Add it to your day in a way that you will do it and it'll be sustainable for you. Everything that we do should actually start small. And the smaller you start, the more that you have the wins that will confirm to you that you are on the right path, you are doing the right thing, and you'll end up being able to keep sustainable change because each day you're getting 1% better. So until next week, and actually until Monday will be the second week of my bonus episodes. So look forward to the episodes coming out on Monday. So talk to you soon. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. Thank you so much for joining today. If you found the episode useful, please share it with your network or leave me a rating or review. It helps me get my message to more people and I would greatly appreciate it. If you'd like to learn more about me, you can visit my website. It's CeciliaHendricks.com.